Something just killed my dog.
Something killed your dog?
My dog went flying through the air over the tree. I don't know how it did it.
Okay.
John Green's research and writings on the subject have encompassed the better part of 20 years. For Green, the Sasquatch exists, despite the fact that he himself has never seen one. A calm, somewhat dispassionate man, his writings reflect a journalistic background. The Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, newspapers in Toronto, Victoria, Vancouver, BC, publisher of a weekly newspaper near Harrison Hot Springs, where he now resides with his wife and family, and where he has devoted a large portion of his time and resources in attempting to obtain a thorough scientific investigation into the subject, and assembling what is certainly one of the largest collections of Bigfoot material available to date. The most conspicuous, of course, being the tracks themselves. Photographed, measured, tested for compression, and preserved in plaster, they represent a significant sample of thousands of tracks that have been found scattered over 500,000 square miles in area and 1,000 miles in length. These, together with reports of sightings and eyewitness accounts of encounters with the animal in question, help to trace the outline, at least, of the phenomenon in which he has played so major a role. First, as a skeptical reporter, and eventually as a dedicated researcher, whose refusal to accept the easy explanation of lies, bears, and hallucinations led to the conviction he holds today. Drawing from hundreds of reports, a number of which he has investigated personally, his up-to-date factual publications have helped greatly to publicize the Sasquatch problem. Yet despite the massive reports, they represent only a small fraction of the populace, and lacking physical evidence, the scientific community remains largely aloof. In the words of Dr. Richard Doherty, head of Washington State University's Department of Physical Anthropology, evidence is a skeletal remains of the animal, and without that, there is no Sasquatch.
Actually, we're, as a nation, rather interested in science fiction, and perhaps that's one of the charms of the field of anthropology, that we can investigate things such as the reports that have occurred over the years of such things as the lost continent of Mu and Atlantis and this kind of mythology. Right at the moment, there's a popular book on chariots of the gods. It'll sell millions of copies, absolutely without scientific fact. And yet, the interest in science fiction is still there. People can look for Sasquatches, they can look for the Yeti or the abominable snowman. I think they could just as profitably spend their time out looking for trolls under bridges or leprechauns in the forest.
Lacking a forest, we settle for an alpine thicket across from Boulder Creek Glacier on the south side of Washington's Mount Baker, whose volcanic proclivities have recently made this area accessible only for a short visit due to possible mudslides. It was here that Rod Puller had found a track following an experience with what he claims was a Sasquatch. Reenacting the possible route of the animal, as it moved down the rocky stream bed, losing its balance momentarily, it had placed one foot on a soft, grassy spot, recovered, and went on, leaving the outlines of a print which Rod later had cast in cement. Whatever it was, it left minimal evidence of its presence. The encounter had taken place in heavy brush, and other than a series of high-pitched screams and an overwhelming stench, the animal had failed to reveal itself. According to Rod, however, who has had considerable experience as an outdoorsman and hunter, what he had heard was unlike anything he had ever heard before, and what he had seen imprinted on the ground next to the stream bed was definitely not the track of a bear. Whatever credibility one may allow to the witness or the animal in question, there's no doubt that the tracks do exist. Either they are made by men or they are made by a very large creature. Something in western North America is responsible for the enormous human-like tracks, which at this point in time is the only tangible evidence that can be subjected to close scientific scrutiny. A Sasquatch enthusiast, even before he acquired his doctorate in physical anthropology, Dr. Grover Kranz of Washington State University has not allowed his new status to change his attitude.
These are not necessarily convincing in themselves just because they're giant feet, but they show characteristics that are not just giant human footprints, but are anatomically designed for extremely heavy body weight. And I don't think anyone could have faked those things. First is the arch. Quite an indentation in the arch in the human foot, and it's not in the Sasquatch, which follows automatically from the great weight. The heel, the human foot, although it's almost as long, its heel is much narrower than the Sasquatch. Again, that's a measure of the weight carrying capacity of the foot. Then on the toes, the different sizes of toes, the big toe is biggest in the Sasquatch, but then they decline only slightly as you go down the line. But in the human, they decline very abruptly. The second toe is very tiny compared to the first. And these are not the sort of characteristics I would expect in someone faking a foot. He would just turn his foot upside down and carve a model of his own foot, and he wouldn't get these characteristics.
There is no Sasquatch.
Kranz does not speak for a large percentage of the scientific community.
There's absolutely no evidence of their existence. Nothing that I would accept as evidence. And on the contrary, there's abundant evidence that there could be no such thing. There's no skeletal remains, no in-focus photographs, a series of reported sightings, footprints that could have been made by anybody. That isn't evidence.
Along with size, it would also be necessary to explain the amount of compression. The question arises, could the tracks be made by an individual capable of carrying a large amount of weight?
He would be, okay, if he's got 100 pounds extra on him, he's weighing 300 pounds. He's putting that weight on a giant fake foot that's going to be 3 times as large as the surface area of his foot. So he's going to be putting down much less weight per square inch, and it will be, in effect, a snowshoeing across the surface of the ground. But these imprints, as I've seen them, are impressed more deeply than a human would impress with an ordinary body weight. So you can't do it just putting a little weight on your back. If you're a 200-pound man, you've got to put something like 500 or 600 pounds on your back to make these imprints. And I don't know anyone who can walk around with 500 pounds on his weight and take 4-foot strides, step over barbed wire fences 44 inches, and climb up and down hills. I'm afraid that's out of the question.